Yes, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga. And I don't have to be smarter than anybody else anywhere else but here. And I wear the bow tie because I want you to understand that you, my listener, can be the smartest man in your category of neckwear, whether it's a T-shirt or an open shirt or regular bow tie, or not bow tie, of course, but just a regular tie. That could make you the smartest person in your group. Now, I wear today a blue bow tie with polka dots. So you can make fun of me if you want. We're live on Facebook at Nooga Radio, and also live on TuneIn Radio. That's TuneIn. That's an app on your smartphone. And if you have that app, you can hear us live there. And also we're live, as I said, Facebook, Nooga Radio, and also Noogaradio.com which is a URL on the internet. So that's those are places where we are readily available and findable. I do appreciate you giving me just a minute of your time. I like living in North County. We are served there by the Northwest Utility District, and whose board last year made last year, well, let's say in recent history, in the past year and a half, made a very bold decision to be conservative, to be cautious. And what that board did, of 7 or 8 members, was to vote out fluoride, which is hydrofluorosilicic acid, vote that out as a danger to the equipment run by that quasi-public utility. That's the Northwest Utility District. So I drink when I come to work with my steel, my aluminum steel, stainless steel insulated cup. That is fluoride-free water. The cleanest water you could find is Northwest Utility District in our area. Now, Hickson Utility District is involved in official pollution of the water supply here at the office. So when I drink my water up in the morning and fill up for going out on sales calls or to do journalism, which is what I do for Nooga Radio as a reporter, I have to get it from the tap here in the studio, and that's Hickson Utility Water, Utility District water. Not in my favor. Okay, not in my favor. Against me. If I were a child in utero and I was consuming that water, I would probably be at a higher risk for neurological damage, and that is what fluoride does, according to studies which I have looked at. I've not researched the issue on my own. Of course, I don't do research. I just read. Okay, that's what I do. Is I just read in certain areas, and sometimes I rely on people such as Karen French from the Tennessee Coalition of Safe Drinking Water, and another party I have on the phone now, Dolores Mackey from Mount Juliet. Now, we want to talk about the whole idea of fluoride because there has been in the General Assembly in Tennessee a bill that really requires the fluoride providers, the sellers of this pollution, whether liquid or powder hydrofluorosilicic acid, to tell the water utilities what is in the containers. What all is in there? We know there's some fluoride in there, but what is the other waste product in the container? Dolores, what was the bill about that? Tell us what happened to the bill. I've got the House number. It was number in the House side 679. What happened to that legislation? What did it say, and what happened?
Okay. Well, the bill was actually 675. And
5, that's right.
What the bill specifically was asking for was that for each batch of the fluoridation chemicals that was received at the water utility district, that they receive a certificate of analysis that shows exactly what was in the product. We know that it's generally about 24% hydrofluorosilicic acid. Sorry, tongue tied this morning. But the question is, what's the other 76%? And of course, what we were finding out was that it varied from location to location. Generally, it would have lead, arsenic, aluminum, barium, mercury. I mean, it could be any combination of things, just depending on where the product was mined. And for your listeners that may not know exactly where we get this product from, it comes from mining phosphate rock for the fertilizer. And what they do is they take the raw phosphate rock and put sulfuric acid on it, and that releases some gases, both which contain fluoride. And because they can't release those gases into the air or into the water, because it would be polluting the air and water, they spray it down with water, and the solution settles at the bottom of the smokestack. They take that solution, once it reaches a percentage of somewhere between usually 23 to 25% fluoride, they take that right out of that smokestack and put it in the tanker and sell it to us. They sell it to distributors. We have 4 main distributors in Tennessee that people use, but there are a bunch of them out there. So depending on where that was mined, it could have, various levels of like we said, arsenic or lead. And the one that is surprised us the most this time were the high levels of aluminum, which, we've known for years that there was arsenic and lead in this, and they always would say, well, it's below the safe levels. Now, you have to understand that the maximum contaminant level goal for lead and arsenic, that is what their goal would be in a perfect world, I guess, would be 0. But of course, it occurs naturally in some rocks and stuff. But what was frustrating to us was that after the water was processed, all of the disinfectant chemicals, and it was nice and pure and clean, then at the end of that process, they add the fluoridation chemical. And so these amounts, because we can't find out in these certificates of analysis of the batch report, we can't find out exactly how much is in that particular chemical. We don't really know how much is being added at the end. So we don't really know, although they tell us that it's safe levels, but some of the certificates of analysis that we were able to get from several years ago, they've stopped giving them out now. But the ones that we were able to get from several years ago, there were some levels of arsenic in particular that were above their accepted levels. And what happened in those situations, we have no idea. Those were primarily in the Memphis area, but it could be anywhere in Tennessee.
This is David Tulis, and we're talking with Dolores Mackey. She is from the Tennessee Coalition of Safe Drinking Water. And regarding the Hickson Utility District, Dolores, and other districts in our listing area here around Chattanooga, we have the use of fluoride. And the Hickson District, in a recent Waterworks newsletter that's sent by snail mail to all the customers, there are several thousand customers in the Hickson area, North Chattanooga area, north of the river. It says that fluoride is called a contaminant, and it identifies it in a graphic as discharge from fertilizer and aluminum factories. So we have an admission that is under some. It's there because the district feels it's under an obligation under the law to give that, but it is called a contaminant, and it's called a discharge from fertilizer and aluminum factories. So is that correct? Does fluoride or hydrofluorosilicic acid that we're drinking here in Hickson and many other parts of Chattanooga come from these factories?
Oh, yes, definitely. In fact, in 1983, an inquiry was made of the EPA, and they received a letter back from the lady at that time that was the deputy assistant administrator for water. And she stated in her letter, by recovering byproduct fluorosilicic acid from fertilizer manufacturing, water and air pollution are minimized, and water utilities have a low-cost source of fluoride available to them. And so that was known back in 1983, that they want us to believe that they'll just say we're just adjusting the natural levels of the fluoride. But what we really tried to focus on in this legislative session, we've been doing this for about 8 or 10 years, we were really trying to focus on the other things that were in there besides fluoride. We certainly don't like fluoride, but we learned pretty quickly that, we had a pretty strong fight on our hands from the opposition that, like to declare, oh, it's been safe and effective for 70 years, and it saves $1 for every, or saves $38 for every dollar spent. They have all this propaganda that they've put out there, but there's really, there's really no facts behind that. And we just want people to understand exactly what's being put in their water.
Well, Dolores, what happened to the legislation? Was it in a committee or a subcommittee that it met its response?
It has to go. We have a Senate bill and a House bill, and the Senate in the past has always passed our bills. They get it. In the House, the bill had to go through a subcommittee, the Agriculture Subcommittee first, and then it would go to the full committee. And if it made it through that, then it would go eventually to the House floor. Our problem has always been the subcommittee, the Ag Subcommittee, and the chairman of that committee. We were not even able to get appointments with him. It was like he just didn't even want to talk to us about whatever our bill was. We gave him information. We gave everybody a lot of, background information, reference materials. And I personally talked with everyone on the subcommittee. There are 7 people on the subcommittee. I talked with 6 of them, but like I said, I was unable to talk with the chairman. And they were all very nice, very interested. They seemed to think that I had very good information. But when the bill finally came up this past Wednesday, it never even received a motion to be heard. And
was that Wednesday? Was that 8 days ago, Dolores?
I have come to believe.
Dolores, was that 8 days ago or yesterday? Dolores, was that
Committee not to make a motion.
Sorry,
so we were not able to.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to ask you a question, and you're talking through me, and I'm talking through you. Just back up here for a second. We're talking with Dolores Mackey from the Tennessee Coalition of Safe Drinking Water. I'm just trying to ask the date when this happened. Was the date of the unfortunate encounter with this bill, was that this Wednesday or 2 Wednesdays ago?
It was this past Wednesday on the 14th. It was scheduled to be heard the week before that, but the TDEC, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, who would be implementing this, talked with Representative Susan Lynn, who is the House sponsor, and said that they were fine with the bill. They just felt like the date that we had on there, which was July of this year, was a little too soon for them to be able to implement it. So they asked that the date be moved.
So the legislation,
anytime you make any kind of a change to the amendment, it has to go through all these official channels. And so that put the bill, we had to roll it for a week.
The legislation says that it would give it requires public inspection of dated copy of the batch specific certificate of analysis for each delivery of fluoride acquired to fluoridate public water supplies. So again, it requires a certificate for a batch specific certificate that declares the complete composition of the formulation of the undiluted raw fluoride substance in percent or parts by weight and or parts per million for each chemical and contaminant in the batch. So you're saying, Dolores Mackey, that a fluoride bag or container is about 24% hydrofluorosilicic acid, and the rest are these other inert materials. Is it really possible that these other materials would be that much containing chromium or chlorine, or not chlorine, but aluminum and arsenic? How real are these very high, these high profile contents, high profile words? How real are they as a percentage of the remaining 75% of a batch of fluoride, Dolores?
Well, it varies a great deal from batch to batch, just like I said, depending on where it comes from. I know my facility down here and quite a few across the state get their fluoride product from a company called Unimem, which is a mining company in Bakersville, North Carolina. And but there are plants like this all over the United States. There are major companies like Mosaic and Monsanto, Simplot, I think it's another one. And some of them, they seem to change names. We used to get a lot from a company called Potash Corporation of Saskatchewan, and then their name changed to Potash Inc. And now they formed a new union with another group, and so they have a new name now. So it seems like they keep changing names, but they can really come from most anywhere, across the country.
And let me ask you about
some of the product comes from Japan or China. Usually, I think more so the powdered product. But what we have found was that just about every sample contains some level of arsenic. Some are lower, but some of them were above the level. Percentage-wise, I don't know that I could tell you that. I probably have to do a little research on that. But I can tell you that the maximum level that they allow is of arsenic in the raw product is 50 parts per million.
That's a pretty high level.
The most recent information, or some of the most recent information we got, it was, of course, which I think you're familiar with, is the lab report from Hickson, Tennessee. And that level of arsenic was 47.7, almost 48%. 50% is the upper level. But what we're finding that people don't know is the amount of arsenic that might be in the incoming water. And I know I asked my water plant manager when they measured the levels of arsenic in the incoming water, and he told me 2011. And I said, I must have not heard that right. So I asked him again, and he said, yes, in fact, it was 2011. And they're only required to measure it.
What do you mean by incoming water?
Once or twice a year. Now, each utility can make their own requirements. Each state can make their own requirements. But everybody just seems to pass the buck along. Well, this is all that so-and-so requires, so this is all we're going to do.
We're talking with Dolores Mackey. Dolores, let me ask you a question. You mentioned incoming water, and you mentioned incoming water. What does that mean? You're talking about water, which is the source of the aquifer? Is that what you're talking about?
Right, the source water, which, of course, we get it here from the Cumberland River. It could be, that will vary across the state also.
Let me ask you about why administrators of utility districts, Dolores Mackey of Tennessee Coalition Safe Drinking Water, why they accept this, and why in their minds it's not just something that we accept as a requirement as they think it, but it's really a benefit. Why, given the controversy, which is of long standing, why does the board say in Hickson Utility District maintain a steadfast approach and will not really consider petitions and pleadings from the public about fluoride?
Well, they get a lot of pressure from the state. Now, the state does not mandate fluoridation, but there is pressure, and I've seen it in my own utility district. If it was left up to each individual water plant, I think they'd get rid of it in a heartbeat, because it's a very dangerous chemical for these workers to have to even deal with. But because the state puts pressure on them to do it, the state, I think, gets pressure from the CDC and the EPA. And I would like to think that these organizations are really looking out for us, but I've just discovered that's not necessarily the case. Back in the 80s, the EPA had their scientists and the professionals that worked there that were, telling them fluoride, this is not safe to be putting in the water. And the EPA just wasn't listening to them. Their upper management, who were many times political appointees, were making the final decisions. And finally, the EPA formed their own union of scientists because they were so frustrated that they couldn't get, their information was not getting out there and people weren't listening to it.
Well, the reason
the same type thing happened. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The reason the board in North Hamilton County voted against fluoridation under the direction here of David Tulis, who is the director. He is a dissenter of the fluoride paradigm, if you will, and again, I say he's against it. And the thing he pointed out to the board is that there is a continuing damage of this acid to the equipment, fittings and pipes and pumps, all eaten away by fluoride, which comes in liquid form. There's a drip room. As we covered the board's exertions over this question, we had a video on Nooganomics.com and also on our Facebook page here at Nooga Radio, showing this room, which is of course kept locked, in which there is damage to the concrete where the main tank, which is purchased, drips into the water that streams past in the piping to the tank. And the workers universally opposed it. And since David Collette, the director, was hoping for support from the public on this question, he let me interview the people. I toured both plants, met the directors of both plants, and they personally didn't like it, and were personally kind of alarmed continuingly about the exposure of fluoride to their persons. And so that's how the board, very conservatively in North County, voted no. And you said, well, they're being liberal and they're being activists and so on. They were really very cautious. Voting it out was a cautious move because, as you say, Dolores Mackey of the Coalition of Safe Drinking Water, there's no obligation to have it, and there are unknown legal liabilities about having it. They're legally liable when they've been presented reports and studies of the dangers, especially neurological dangers, to very young children of fluoridated water.
Well, and one thing that's very frustrating to me is that right now, according to the CDC's very own facts, 58% of our children up to the age, primarily in the teenage range, 58% of them have some form of dental fluorosis. Now, for your listeners that may not be familiar with dental fluorosis, it starts out usually as really super white spots on the teeth. But it can, as you accumulate more fluoride, it can turn into dark spots, and eventually it can just cause the teeth to kind of just look decayed or fall apart. And what it does, they know that topically it does harden the enamel of the teeth. But our complaint has always been there's no reason for it to be taken in systemically. You can get all you need from toothpaste. The whole thing of putting it in our water just seems insane to me, because if you've got 58% of your children that have these obvious signs of fluoride poisoning, why would you continue to force it on them? And we're getting it not just in the water we drink, it comes through our skin when we bathe in it. And of course, the majority of it just goes out into our landscaping or, washing cars, doing laundry. But, it's just to me, a very inefficient way if they're going to do it anyway.
Well, listen, Dolores, thank you very much. We're talking with Dolores Mackey of Tennessee Coalition of Safe Drinking Water. Thanks for joining us, Dolores. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
David Tulis here with Nooga Radio 92.7 or 92.7 FM, Nooga Radio. And also, we are on the most powerful and amazing high-definition channel, and that is 95.3 HD4. That's 95.3 down there in the subsectors of Channel 4 HD, high definition. If my voice were graphed out, you would see a separate line for my Bob and Adams apple, because that's how fine HD is. It's totally rich. And here we are wasting all that great power on mere conversation with you, my listener. Here, David Tulis, I do thank you for giving me just a minute of your time. That's all I ask for, a minute. And I argue that you should love your neighbor and buy local, brought to you by yournews.com. That's yournews.com. Chattanooga, David Tulis, the blogger with the biggest pen.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on